Welcome to the Joy of Cruising podcast with your host, award-winning author Paul C. Thornton, a weekly conversation with the amazing cruisers featured in the Joy of Cruising books, comprised of The Joy of Cruising, Cruising Interrupted, new release The Joy of Cruising Again, as well as other fun, informative global cruise personalities. It's the next best thing to cruising, hearing about cruising from the unique and diverse perspectives of Paul's amazing guests. If you hear about a cruise that interests you, book it at www.thejoyofacation.com or enter to win a free cruise for two. Again, www.thejoyofacation.com. We really appreciate your feedback, so leave us a text. Paul can't reply, but he may read your text on the air.
Hello, Patrick Cruisers. This is Paul, and this week on the Joy of Cruising podcast, join me and guest Peter Knego, a maritime historian, cruise journalist, and creator of the YouTube channel MidShipCinema, who is currently working on a comprehensive video about the fascinating career and sad end of the first Pacific Princess. Princess Cruises' much-loved ship that was the star of the Love Boat television series that changed the face of cruising forever. With 2025 as the 60th anniversary year of Princess now unfolding, Peter will share what was pioneering and special about the Pacific Princess and discuss how that ship captured the imagination of millions of future cruisers. He will also share what became of this once revered ship in her post-Princess days. I am delighted to welcome back Peter, who has one of the most unique and multifaceted seafaring stories I have ever heard. His home is virtually entirely comprised of cruise ship artifacts. Every part of his home is made up of panels, artwork, and furniture, including bars from scrap ships. During his first visit with us, episode 56, we focused mainly on the collector aspects of Peter's persona, and he took us on a virtual tour of his house and backyard comprised of original artwork and artifacts, including some from the Love Boat. You can learn a great deal about Peter the collector and his passion for older ships from his website, MidShipCentury.com, and YouTube channel, Peter Knego's MidShipCinema, described as unique, exclusive, and personally captured video of the world's great ocean liners and cruise ships, past and present. Welcome back, Peter, to the Joy of Cruising podcast.
Paul, thank you so much for having me, and thanks for the fantastic intro. You're very, very kind.
So how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm enjoying the winter here in Southern California, where it's, mid-70s most days. There's snow on the mountains, and we finally got some rain. And this is my chance to catch up and make YouTube videos. I'm not traveling a lot. I probably will start, getting back on the high seas maybe mid-April, May. So right now I'm catching up and writing and working on various projects.
Hey, I know you're a music guy. You would like this. I just got back from the Soul Train cruise.
Oh, wow.
It was absolutely, for people who grew up watching Soul Train, like I did, it was absolutely amazing. Amazing.
Who were the bands? Who played?
Probably the biggest name is he's actually more from today than he was back in the day of Soul Train. Well, when he was back in the day of Soul Train, Charlie Wilson, he used to be the Gap Band.
Oh wow, okay, cool.
So he was big with the Gap Band back then, but today he's pretty much a solo artist, and just he's like 75, 76 years old. And he's just a bundle of energy. I mean, I've seen him so many times now, and I don't get tired of him. He keeps reinventing himself. But the old school bands, it was a version of Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Oh,
There's actually a couple of competing versions out there.
Yeah.
Confunction, Sky, Lakeside, what used to be Rick James's group. So it's some originals from that group.
Right.
And then of course some newer people. And then of course, Rick James passed. So the guy who played Rick James was really good. Delphonics, Blue Mat, it's just so many groups.
Wow.
Yep.
That sounds.
And next
Yeah, on
I
those
was going to say
cruises.
next year's lineup is even better, so I already booked
Oh,
it.
you're on it. Good for you. Yeah, those cruises, it just seems like it's exhausting, trying to catch everybody you want to see and actually, enjoy the cruise itself. It seems like it's just, I have a friend, Judy Cuervo. I don't know if you've ever interviewed her, but she's an incredible writer. And she does those rock and roll things at sea, and the Moody Blues cruise, which is something I
Right.
really wish I did, because now they're almost all gone or they don't perform anymore. And it just sounds like exhausting. If you want to see all the shows, you just gotta, you're basically standing in line, or it's all about that, not so much about fine dining and exploring
Yeah.
and
Yep. Very apt description. In fact, I have commented on, maybe the second or third day, what I call a theme cruise, you feel like you've already done a week on a regular cruise.
yeah.
But fill in some details for the listeners. Where you're from, where you live,
Sure.
what's your background, anything you would like to add.
I live in Oceanside, California, which is about 90 miles south of Los Angeles, where I grew up. I grew up mainly in Hollywood and Westwood. My mom was a high fashion model, beautiful lady, as lovely as a mom as she was in the photos and movies that she made. And my dad was an actor, and he had a degree of success, and he had a bit of a troubled life, I'll say, and he wasn't necessarily the greatest dad, but we became really good friends because of cruise ships. When I was a kid and I fell in love with ocean liners and cruise ships, I needed somebody to drive me down to the port of LA. We lived about 25 miles from the port, and the port of LA itself wasn't the greatest neighborhood for a little kid to be roaming around. So I needed somebody to take me down there. And so my dad loved ships, and he came to America on this old ocean liner, the Empress of Australia, just before World War II. He got seasick. I get seasick to this day, so I know where I get that from. But we love ships, both of us. So we would sort of bond over that and spend a day walking around various cruise ships. And I did that for a long time. My goal as a kid was to document every ocean liner and cruise ship that came to Los Angeles, especially after I learned that they didn't last forever and they would get scrapped at a certain point. And so I just took it upon myself, not realizing other people were doing it as well, but I wanted to make sure that these ships were somehow preserved. So me with my stupid pocket Instamatic camera, I mean, wish I had better stuff. But since I was a kid, since about mid 1974 onwards, I've been documenting ships. So I've got literally over 1 million images that I've taken over the years, and a couple thousand hours of video footage. And that's been my passion and hobby. And after I got out of the music business in the early 2000s, I made that a focus and a career itself. So I became a cruise journalist. I already knew everything about the ship, so it was just a natural fit. And it gave me a chance to see the world, or much more of the world than I had seen up to that point. And during that process, a lot of the old ships that I had gone off to visit in various corners of the world were being scrapped at a place in India called Alang. And so as a kid, when I saw all the ships going to Taiwan to be scrapped, I wished that I could do something about it, save some of the artwork or furnishings. And I couldn't as a kid, but as an adult, I could. So I literally started getting, faxing the shipbreakers, and I had a contact there who arranged things for me. He would go aboard and get the furnishings, bells, builder's plates, light fixtures, and ship them to me in California. I kept most of the stuff that I personally loved or things that I thought were important historically, built them into my house. And then I sold the rest online. I have a website called MidShipCinema, where you don't even have to love ships if you just appreciate beautiful mid-century furnishings and design. That's basically what these ships were filled with. So I did that. I don't know, I got about maybe 15 40-foot containers over the years. and I sold artworks and fittings to interior designers. And there was a guy who ran the LA Modernism show, and he loved especially the Italian stuff that I was getting. So it was featured very prominently, and a lot of stuff went to go, reside in movie stars' homes and stuff because this guy was top end and he had all the good contacts. So that was a nice thing. It's not as busy now for me. I did recently get a container full of stuff from some of the Carnival new builds in the 80s, which is something I said I would never do. I'm never going to go to the 80s. And of course, now the 80s are kind of cool. So I got stuff from the Holiday and Celebration and the Tropical. And now I have a garage full of these beautiful Helen Weber ceramics. I was hoping Carnival would step up because I have a feeling one of their new builds that they've announced is going to be called the Holiday. So I thought maybe because I've got these beautiful ceramics from the Holiday that they might want to install it in the new ship like they did with the Carnival Celebration when I sold them a bunch of stuff from the Mardi Gras and Carnival, their first ships. So I don't know if it's not going to happen, but I haven't heard much from them lately. So I'll probably put them on my website and get to work on selling them. And that's kind of where I am. So I'm in this situation where I'm working as a cruise journalist, traveling between 6 and 10 times a year. I take a cruise, and then I have the website. And what has been my main passion over the past year or so is developing my YouTube channel, which is called Peter Knego's MidShipCinema. And I do videos about the old ships like the Achille Lauro and the Britannis and a bunch of great old liners that I sailed in. And I do tours of the new ships. Like right now, I'm finishing up a video about Windstar's beautiful Star Legend. I've got Sea Cloud that I just finished, which is the most historic cruise ship afloat, built as a yacht in 1931. So that's my passion. And I'm going to do a video. My next project, which I'll start probably tomorrow, will be about the Pacific Princess, the Love Boat, because she, it's Princess's 60th anniversary at the end of the year. And B, I've had people just begging me, when are you going to do the Pacific? I did the Island, which was the identical sister. So now I'm going to give her dues. And I was lucky to get footage of her in New York just before she left on her final cruise and was sold. So I documented her in her very last days as a princess ship. And then I went on board in the shipyard in Italy just before she was scrapped and documented her from top to bottom as well. And then I went to the scrapyard and filmed her there. So I'll have a lot of footage, and I plan to interweave some interviews I did with Gavin MacLeod, who is, of course, Captain Stubing. Wonderful man, delightful person. And we had a lovely day together. And I've got lots of him talking about how much he loved that ship. So that's my next video. And I'm really excited. I can't wait to get to work on that one.
So let me jump in and ask, about the Pacific Princess. Talk about how that ship captured the imagination of millions of future cruisers.
We'll be right back.
The Joy of Cruising podcast guests receive a gift sponsored by GigSky of a 3 gigabyte cruise plus land data package valued at $60. Relying on ship Wi-Fi is slow, unsecure, and sometimes not available. And at foreign ports, travelers don't want to pay their carriers high fees. GigSky provides a solution that will save them a significant amount of money. To get your own data package usable on the ship or in ports, here is my link to GigSky. https://gigsky.pxf.io/NLOXOR. This can be found in the show notes below. For a 10% discount, use the code Joy of Cruising.
Absolutely. In 1976, 77, when the Love Boat started, she was the A-list, top of the pick, state-of-the-art cruise ship. She and the Island Princess were Norwegian designed, built in Germany. They had magrodomes over their main pool, which was a tiny pool, by the way. It would barely be a wading pool on one of today's cruise ships. But it was the center of activity on the ship in the daytime, and of course, featured a lot on the Love Boat show. But the cool thing was that you could slide the glass dome over the pool when it was raining or cold outside. Now, we take that for granted today because every ship pretty much has a magrodome, or they call it a sliding glass dome because that was a trademark name. But also the Pacific and Island had this two-story lobby, which was rebuilt as a kind of a cheap-looking set on the show. But it was very cool because guests could walk down these stairs and make their entrance. And this was the precursor to today's cruise ship atrium.
Mm-hmm.
So they were very ahead of the curve on that as well. And just their layout, where they had all of the public rooms up high on the ship with full-length windows everywhere. You know, the old ocean liners, as much as I love them, they tended to be a little dark, and to cruisers who were going to tropical places, a little dreary because, you know, they had portholes or small windows. And these ships just, you know, you sat in any public room and you looked out and it was a wall of glass you were looking through, so you could enjoy where you were. So those ships were very cutting edge, and they laid down the blueprint for the massive modern ships. And that's what people came to expect of cruise ships, because they watched this show in their living room every Saturday night. And, you know, they sleek modern ships that Princess was operating, those two really sort of paved the way for the new generation of cruise ships. So they're very important.
Now they were identical, right?
Yes, structurally identical. They had a couple of the public rooms had different names, and they had different color schemes and different artwork, which to me was wonderful because I love that little variety where you walked in, say, on the Island Princess, the aft lounge was called the Carib Lounge, and on the Pacific, it was called the Pacific Lounge. So on the Island was this gorgeous bronze panel of sailing ships, old Viking sailing ships, that was on the backdrop behind the stage. And on the Pacific, it was a beautiful ceramic with inlaid metals of Norwegian gods and goddesses.
Mm-hmm.
So that was just cool that, you know, even though if you knew one ship, you knew the other by heart, everything was, you know, where it was on the other ship, but you had a little variety, different color schemes, and these beautiful artworks, which I didn't even appreciate at the time, are magnificent.
Now, but when you're watching the Love Boat, there's no way. Could you differentiate between the two?
Oh yeah,
I know a layman couldn't, but could someone like yourself?
Yes, and actually, on my YouTube channel, forgive my commercial, I did a lecture on board Discovery Princess during one of the Love Boat reunions, and that lecture was all about the differences between Island and Pacific versus the actual Love Boat set, so that if you're watching the show, you can tell whether it was, you know, they were filming at Paramount that day, or they actually went on one of the cruises. And the irony is they film more on the Island than the Pacific, even though the Pacific's name was used. And the Island, the pool area, had a little girl statue in bronze. And on Pacific, it was a little boy. But I think they felt that a little girl was better, you know, aesthetically as a backdrop. So when they recreated the set for the show, they actually did it based on the Island Princess versus the Pacific Princess's sculpture. And I actually own the sculpture from the Island. I bought that, you know, in India when she was scrapped, and it's now by our swimming pool. So you can have a Love Boat moment in our pool if you want.
Yeah, for the listeners, the previous time that Peter was on the show, we focused a lot, not totally, but a lot on Peter the collector, and how much of his house is made up of ship artifacts. Some of you would have seen that actually, because we used photos to promote that episode showing the statue out at Peter's. What else? What are some of the other things, Peter, from either of the ships? Did you get your hands on as a as a collector, or as just someone who wanted to beautify your house?
Well, I didn't get anything, sadly, from Pacific. I tried very hard, but when she arrived at the scrapyard, she almost sank on the way. She developed a leak and she was listing severely to starboard, and they barely got her on the beach. Otherwise, she would have sank if they didn't get her up there. And then while she was there, they tried to pump her out and they didn't know what they were doing. And sadly, three of the workers died in the engine room because they didn't have any air being pumped in, and it was sucking up all the oxygen. So they basically suffocated. So it was very controversial.
Wow.
And for me to be there at that time was difficult, but I managed it. And I tried to make a deal with the shipbreaker to buy all the artwork. It was still there on the ship. The only thing missing was the sculpture of the little boy. Somebody in the Italian shipyard had made off with it at some point before she left for scrap. So anyway, all these things were on board, and the breaker just said, nah, the ship is listing too much. We're just going to go and demolish everything. So they didn't even strip the stuff.
Wow.
They just destroyed all of it. And that drove me insane. But I didn't have a good contact in Turkey like I do in India. So, of course, the irony is the next year, the Island Princess, as Discovery, in her final guise, sailing out of the UK market, she was sold for scrap. And I followed her to India. I was there right away as soon as she got there. And I did get all of her artwork. So I'm very happy about that. In the lobby on Pacific, there was a big bronze sculpture on the Carrara marble wall. And you can see a very poor imitation of that on the Love Boat set. And I've never seen that sculpture actually on a Love Boat episode, but I have seen the one from Island, which was this series of glass panels that I rescued. And I actually offered them to Princess right away to see if they might want them for their headquarters, or anyway, they weren't interested. So I kept the 4 pieces that I liked the most. And then I started selling the other ones on my website, Midship Century. But that you can see quite often in several episodes, as well as a lot of the other artwork I got from Island. And I think they filmed on Island more because she was in LA more. So it was easier to take the cast down, put them on the ship, and they go off on a cruise to Mexico, when the Pacific was venturing out on longer cruises and going to the Caribbean a lot. And I think that it was just easier to film on Island.
What became of the Pacific Princess in the latter part of its life before it was scrapped?
Princess sold her in 2002 to Pullman Tour Cruises, which was a Spanish cruise line that sadly went out with COVID. And Pullman Tour graduated from that one ship. They kept her name. They kept her name Pacific. They dropped the Princess because they had to. And they sailed her in South America and the Caribbean and in European waters during the summer. And she had a pretty good career with them. And then they subchartered her to a company called Quail Cruises, which only lasted about a year. And the ship needed some repairs. So they took her to a shipyard in Italy. And they started doing the repair work, and then Quail Cruises went bankrupt and didn't finish paying the bill. So the ship was largely taken apart. The lifeboats had been removed. The davits were put on, and they were put on incorrectly. This is what I learned when I was in Italy. So they wouldn't have worked. So they spent something like $10 million and they were doing repairs. There was lots of corrosion on the ship in various areas, and they did beautiful repairs in parts of it. And then other parts of the ship were just literally rotting through. There was, one deck in the crew area that I could look down 2 decks worth through the holes in the 2 decks
Wow.
below that one. So she was in very bad shape. And I actually went to inspect her in Italy for a cruise line that was interested in buying her, and unfortunately she was just too far gone. So that's when they sold her for scrap. And actually, the first time they sold her for scrap, the scrapper didn't finish paying, so the ship didn't leave Italy. And then they had another auction, and the $1 million starting bid, nobody offered that. $1 million for a 600 passenger cruise ship, and they couldn't sell the Love Boat, which is crazy. I mean, you can barely buy a house in California for $1 million. I mean, so anyway, she sat for a few years, which was good for me because I got to visit her. And then finally the Turkish breakers bought her, and then that was the end of her.
Say something about, to the extent that you can divulge, details about the film project.
I have a very nice archive. I have everything. I mean, I'm holding in my hand as we speak. I wish I could show you the very first brochure issued for Princess Cruises using the Princess Patricia, the Canadian Pacific ocean liner that was based in Vancouver. And they brought her down and they chartered her. And she did these 2-week voyages from LA. And she only went to Puerto Vallarta, Manzanillo, Acapulco, and Mazatlan. And she was a slow ship. They're actually recreating the same cruise at the end of the year that the Princess Patricia did. And the only reason Princess Cruises has its name is because the first ship they chartered was called the Princess Patricia. So borrow that from Canadian Pacific. So anyway, I've got this vast archive of materials. I've got all the film that I've shot on board. I've got the interview with Gavin. So I'm going to weave together a video. It'll probably be about 45 minutes. And that's going to be hard because I've got so much footage. So I expect that should be ready shortly after our interview airs, or hopefully even before. So your listeners can go and check it out, and I hope they enjoy it.
I suspect Gavin MacLeod has quite a fan club.
Yeah, but his following. Oh, but his following is, he passed about 2 years ago. But I had a lovely relationship with him in the very end. I was supposed to, the girls from Princess, Karen and Julie, who were the PR team at Princess about 5-6 years ago, and they were awesome. And they set up this meeting with Gavin and I in Palm Springs. And I was told, you'll get about 20 minutes. So just, make it short and sweet. But, so I went to meet Gavin at this restaurant. And of course, I was fascinated, not just with his Captain Steubing role on the Love Boat, but him as an actor overall. And me coming from a background where my father was an actor and my mom was a model, I kind of knew what that life was about. So we ended up talking for 4 hours, I think maybe longer than that. I mean, he told me about, his work on stage and Broadway, all of his early TV stuff. And both he and my dad were on shows, but not necessarily at the same time. Like my dad did McHale's Navy, and Gavin was actually a regular on McHale's Navy until he got out. They were both good friends with Robert Blake, that kind of crazy guy who was accused of, Robert Blake, with the bird on his shoulder, right? Yeah, but he was a child actor. He was actually a very good actor. And Gavin told me this great story about he actually tried to commit suicide. He was an alcoholic. He was depressed. He hated his role in McHale's Navy, and he drove his car off Mulholland Drive, right? And fortunately, he didn't die. The car rolled over and, crashed, I think, into a tree. And then he got out, and Robert Blake lived nearby. And so he went to Robert Blake's place, and Blake helped him, that he sobered up and got his act together. And Blake, kind of checked in on him and made sure things were good. And Gavin started a whole new career and took off. He left McHale's Navy, and that's when he was starting to get all these great roles on TV, which led to Mary Tyler Moore, which is one of the greatest shows ever made. And then, of course, Captain Steubing in the Love Boat, where he got to work with all the people he idolized as a kid. Just an incredible, all the great old movie stars were mixed in there with, Barbie Benton and all the stars of the 70s basically on that show. So he loved that experience. And so we just talked and talked and talked, and I recorded it all. And so I definitely plan to use a lot of that with the Pacific Princess video.
Sounds like a wonderful project. When you are ready to promote it, in the wake of this running on the channel, I can just post it on the Facebook group.
Oh, that would be so cool. Thank you, Paul. I'm really trying to build the channel, because I think I do offer a certain expertise in my reviews. I'm not just walking around with the selfie stick going, "Oh my God, it's a swimming pool." I give a background on, what the ship was and the architecture and who designed it, and, maybe too much information for some casual observers. But I try to put in everything, discuss food, talk about the decor, talk about what changes were made, what works, what doesn't. And I try to do it in an intelligent and engaging way. So I'd love for my channel to get more support, and I thank you for that.
Yeah, I'd be glad to, because I'm surprised that not belittling YouTube, but that sounds worthy of television. Particularly you've got a lot of hours with Gavin.
Yeah, I do. So, well, from your lips, as they say, knock on wood, who knows?
Since we changing the subject, Pete, it's been over a year since we last chatted. What have you cruised in that time?
Oh, I had a really good year last year. I did Viking Polaris, one of the two expedition ships that Viking has, and I love Viking. They're among my very favorite, if not my favorite, cruise line. So I sailed on the Polaris from Fort Lauderdale to Toronto on her positioning cruise before she started the Great Lakes. So that was wonderful. I did a Japan cruise on Diamond Princess, which was phenomenal. Japan is one of the most beautiful countries on the planet, and the people are so lovely, and it was so great. I can't say enough about it. I want to go back, because it was only 8 days, and there's so much more to see in Japan than just that. So that was something we did early summer last year. And then I did Sea Cloud again, which is my favorite ship, because she's 1931 vintage and built as a private yacht. And her interiors, most of the original parts of the ship still remain. So you have this gorgeous woodwork and these original brass light fixtures, and she just has so much soul and character. Of course, it's very expensive. Sea Cloud's very exclusive. Ship only carries 60 guests, and she's going to carry fewer because she's going to go into dry dock next year, and they're going to take out all of the new cabins they added and reduce her capacity and make her almost like a private yacht again.
That's going the opposite direction that you usually hear about with dry docks.
It is, isn't it? Which is so interesting and strange, but I think they really want to, the ship is going to be 100 years old in 2031. And I think they just wanted her to be as original as she was, and probably use her less for public cruising and maybe focus on private charters, which she'd be perfect for, So that was something. I did Quasi Europe. The budget French-owned river cruise line. I did a Rhine trip with them, and I didn't have high expectations, and that blew me away. It was very basic as far as the boat, the ship itself was concerned, but the food was phenomenal, and it was fun to sail with people from different countries and speaking different languages. It's just a cultural experience. So I had a nice year. Wrapped it up with a beautiful Greek islands and Turkey cruise on the Seabourn Legend, which is the ship I'm working on the video about now, which was originally the Royal Viking Queen. And her interesting bit of history is that she was used in the movie Speed 2 as the set, and she was hijacked by terrorists and blah blah. I mean, it was a bomb of a movie, but it was an interesting little facet in the ship's career.
Now you're going to make me sit through Speed 2 again.
Just fast forward it to the end. Because they actually built this giant set kind of mimicking the Seabourn Legends. At that time she was Seabourn, her bow crashing into this Caribbean village, and then they CGI'd the rest of the stuff in the crash scene. But just fast forward to the very end and watch that for your amusement.
Okay.
But the ship itself is beautiful, and I love Windstar. They did a great job. They cut the ship in half and added 84 feet midsection to her, which improved her passenger flow and made her decks just gorgeous. And she is just beautiful. So yeah, that's my current video that I'm working on right now.
What's coming up in 25?
Good question. I've got a lot of potentials lined up, but I don't have definites yet. I'm not panicking yet. I'm a freelancer, so we're as good as our last article or video, basically. But it tends to be feast or famine. As a freelancer, you get too many gigs and then you get worn out, or you can't do them all, or you have nothing for long periods of time. So I'm enjoying my winter right now and catching up, making all the videos and stuff, and just getting ready. I hope I'll have a really good spring and early summer. But I do have my eye on a few things. I don't want to jinx them.
Do you, Peter, have a bucket list in your field as a maritime historian and artifacts collector? Is there something you want to accomplish, a long-term goal that you haven't yet accomplished?
Well, very good question, Paul. And as I wake up and I look in the mirror and I'm shocked at how old I am because I don't feel it, I'm like, yeah, I got to get this collection of mine secured somehow with a maritime museum, or ideally get my house preserved as it is to be used for functions and public tours, should there be an interest. The problem is I live in a neighborhood of homes where people live, so I don't know what the what kind of hoops you have to jump through. I know it has been done in certain circumstances, and it happens all the time in Europe. There's never any problem with that. So I need to look into that and really get on the ball with that, because not only is my house, everything in it is from a ship and has a beautiful story to it, but I've got these archives, my photographs, all the video, the brochures. I've got probably 40 full, 4-drawer deep file cabinets full of menus, brochures, everything from just about every ship you can possibly imagine from the 20th century on up. So that's my goal, is to have all of this preserved. And I figure I've got about a good 20 years to figure all of that out. So that's the goal.
It sounds, Peter, like you have a wonderful coffee table book in you.
I hope I've got about 10. But as I've learned from all of my friends who write these beautiful books, they work on a book for a year and they'll get about $200 or $300. And sadly, people aren't reading books anymore. I mean, I loved making DVDs of my video. They don't even buy DVDs. Everything is basically digital, online. So I hear you, and I'd love to write some books, but I'm focusing on where I think I can actually reach the most people sooner.
Peter, before we let you go, we usually ask our guests some light or even fun cruise questions. We didn't ask you these last time because you had, that again, listeners, that's when we were going through Peter's house in great detail. It was just so much. But, just to give listeners a sense for what you like, other than being, a historian extraordinaire. What's your favorite cruise drink and cruise food?
Okay. Well, I'm kind of boring, right? In that regard. I'm mostly vegetarian, so I don't do the steak and lobster thing so much. But I will say my favorite cruise drink, and I would be lost without it, is a cappuccino. I need to have cappuccinos 3 to 4 times a day. I'll do almond milk, I'll do oat milk, but just a really good cappuccino, especially on the ships in Europe, they know how to make them really well. So that's my favorite drink, and good red wine at dinner. So those are my two drinks. And as far as food goes, here I go again. I'm boring, but I love a really good salad bar with all natural good ingredients, especially when you're in Europe and the Mediterranean. You get all the things like fresh olives and good olive oil and balsamic vinegar and real Reggiano Parmesan cheese. That is the stuff I live for. And good pasta, like you get on Oceania or Viking.
Hmm.
Just with good bread that you can dip in the olive oil, and I'm just that's it. That just makes my time.
All right. Second question. What's your most wonderful or memorable or funniest or even most embarrassing cruise or port experience?
Huh. Oh, that's a good question. Oh my gosh, Paul. Well, I would probably say mm, being able back in the 90s, the Rotterdam 5, the old steamship from 1959, she was still in service, and I never went back to the same ship very often. But with the Rotterdam, I sailed in her 5 times, and then I sailed in her once more as the Rembrandt. And to be on a ship built before I was born that had all of this beautiful woodwork and these original artworks and all that mid-century style, that was just, to me, the ultimate experience to be on that ship. And unlike so many of the other old ships that I was sailing in, she was still A-list. She was being operated by Holland America in the United States. She had to meet all those safety standards, and she was beautifully maintained. The food was excellent. And I met friends who are still friends of mine from our first cruise on the Rotterdam in 1991. So I would say that's probably my ultimate experience. And I went on her in Alaska. I went on her Caribbean twice. I did the final voyage, which was the Panama Canal. And every one of those has memories that I absolutely cherish. So Rotterdam 5.
All right. Last question. I call this an oddball question, and that's because it doesn't have necessarily anything to do with cruising. You have a large following, so welcome to the many Peter Knego fans and friends listening. We hope your fans have enjoyed what they have heard and will come back for future episodes so that your friends can get to know you just a little better. Share one thing that my listeners and your fans and friends don't know about Peter.
Well, what would they know? Because I'm out there so much, telling everybody everything I do. But what don't they know? Uh, Gosh, Paul, you got me on that one. Because if I hadn't always been posting stuff on Facebook and Instagram about every little thing I do, I'd come up with some nuggets. I guess one thing that a lot of cruise people don't know is that Ed Wood, the guy who's the worst film director in history, who did Plan 9 from Outer Space, was one of my dad's friends. and he actually died in my dad's apartment. So I was there the night before that happened. So, on another show we could talk about that, I'm sure, because that was quite an experience. It was very sad. But it gave me a very interesting life. My father knew all these strange people who ended up having cult followings like Ed Wood. So that might be something people don't know about me. I've got a lot of little surprises like that in my background growing up with my two parents. So
Yeah, just between your mom and your dad's careers, you there's another podcast.
okay, let's do it.
It's been over a year since you've been on, so pencil it in. Sometime early 26, we'll have you back, and we won't struggle for anything to talk about because, again, if you hadn't listened to the first show, folks, Peter has a whole music career that he could talk about.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Oh, I'd love to do that. It's Sparks. Just the Google the band Sparks, everyone, because they were a 20-year project of mine to be able to work with them. They were the most brilliant people I've ever known. And Paul, thank you for what you're doing for the cruise industry and for your passion and for all the people you interview and putting together such a great show. I get your list of what's coming up, and it blows me away how busy and dedicated you are. And you just do such a good job. So thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for saying that, Peter. It has been great speaking with you. Thank you for coming back on the Joy of Cruising podcast, and we'll see you again in 26. All the best to you and MidShipCinema. And as I like to say, we'll see you on the ocean.
Thank you, Paul.
The Joy of Cruising and Cruising Interrupted, each $16.99 plus shipping, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again for $18.99 can be ordered at the link on thejoyofcruisingpodcast.com. For each of the 3 books, use the discount code Joy of Cruising Podcast and get $4 off. The Joy of Cruising books are also available at Amazon. Order the ebook at Amazon or your favorite online retailer. Stay in touch by joining the Joy of Cruising Podcast Facebook group or following the Joy of Cruising Podcast on Instagram. We're constantly adding new shows. Please leave a review and tell a friend about us. We hope you enjoyed this brief escape to the ocean. See you next week.